Awesome. Cool. So Ben, thank you so much for joining me, man. It's good to see you.
No worries.
So for those who don't know, Ben is a member of the Seven Figure Freedom Program, and I wanted to ask Ben about his experiences in hiring recently. But before any of that stuff, Ben, do you want to give us a bit of an overview about what you and Value Engine do?
Okay, so I run the Value Engine. We are a growth and strategy consulting business. We work with service and manufacturing businesses, 2 to 30 million, who have a challenge with low margin and not being able to bring winning products to the market. So we work with them and we help them solve those problems.
Yeah, awesome, man. That's cool. And so recently, this is what you had shared in the group. You've taken on a VA, and you and I have had a bit of a conversation about how that works and how that manages. I know that you've obviously worked with people before, but hired people before. Take me through how you found your current team member then. Like, how did this come about?
Okay, so the first thing I did was I went through my week and I understood everything I was doing.
Yeah.
And that was an eye-opening task. There weren't like huge things that I could hand over. I couldn't just say to someone, do all my social media or do this. But there are lots of little things. Sorting my inbox in the morning, sending out invoices, doing things which I hate, like doing my mileage expenses, all that type of stuff. So there were all these things. So I made a list, and the sales service stuff was really, really helpful in this. I kind of followed through the module, and I did each activity at one stage because I wanted to do the learning, put it into practice, and then go to the next bit. So the first thing I did was that, and then I can be the person who wants it all fully wrapped before I do it.
Yeah.
On the advice of Mike, I just jumped in there and I used the templates to advertise on the online jobs.ph. I think about 80 applications.
Wow.
Really, really good quality. It took a bit of time to sift through those, but again, I used the templates. That saved me hours. And then what I did is I set up daily tasks, weekly tasks, monthly tasks, and random tasks. And initially, I advertised the job at 17.5 hours a week. I've started at kind of an hour and a half a day because I want to get the basics working and then to scale. So I did a lot of selection by pre-email. Then I shortlisted, I think, 4 who I interviewed. There were 2 VAs who were really good, and I went for one of those, Alicia.
Cool.
And I've got to say, it's going really, really well.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad, man. So, okay, so that's really interesting. That's a really interesting point that you found you didn't have huge one-off chunks that you could hand off. It was lots of smaller things. Is that what you were expecting? Is that what you thought you would hand off? Talk to me about that.
I think when you talk about handing over, you think, oh,
Yeah.
I want to hand over this big thing.
Yeah.
But actually, the reality is that a lot of it does need you.
Yeah.
But actually, it's only when I realised the amount of time I was spending. It's only when I realised the amount of time I was spending on all those small things.
Mm.
And one of the things I do is you get lots of different emails, and we're still refining this. But I said to Alicia, before I start, I want you to go through my emails every morning and tell me what I need to look at. So because email can be a huge time eater, it's easy to, you focus on doing the stuff which is really important in the day. Look at your emails, there's like 50 emails, and however much you unsubscribe from this and that, you still get it. And that's great. I wake up and there's like 7 emails in my inbox, and increasingly Alicia is dealing with all of those. I block out my calendar, so if people say, can I talk to you, she can book the time in, all those types of things. So things like parking. So in the UK, park, you pay on the app, and then your accountant says, can you send me the receipts? And then you have to go onto the app, and I have to download the receipts. And all these things take up time, and they stop me doing the stuff which I need to do. And I spend more time doing that. And that's a whole nother story, but that's kind of really exciting.
That's so well. Do you mind if we ask you about that? Like, because I know that's something you've been working on a lot. First of all, are you clearer now on like what your core role is and what you should be doing day in, day out in the business?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely, for sure. When I started my business, you do a period, I guess it's almost live market research, which you go out, you learn about the market, you learn about your own capabilities, and you cook that down. And when I started the program, I recognized that people really valued the clarity I gave. That was huge, the clarity. But actually, no one wakes up at 4 a.m. in the morning saying, I need clarity.
Right.
Whereas actually, they
Yeah.
wake up saying, I want more time and I'm not getting the money I deserve. I know I need clarity.
Mm.
So at the moment, I have 2 signature systems, and that will be refined down to 1, but it almost suits 2 of my different client groups. And I've created a program where 3 stages. So the first stage is we get eye-opening clarity. We look at their offering, their team, and their financials. Eye-opening clarity on today's status. Then we work to get aligned direction. Again, we look at the offering, their team, and their financials. So we're really clear where money is made, where money is lost. And this is for the kind of 2 to 30 million business.
Mm.
And then for the smaller businesses, in the final section, we scalable growth by creating an operating model, looking at how that works with their team and looking at how they grow their customers. For the slightly bigger businesses, which serve more than one segment, we do a lot of stuff on innovation strategy. So we look at their innovation routines. How do they do what they do a little bit better and consistently? When you talk to most businesses, they find this really, really hard.
Yeah.
And also, how do they do the more radical innovation and how do they make that work in the business? So I've created those 2 systems which kind of take people through 3 phases,
Yeah.
and they are standard products, and that allows me to standardize my offer. It means that we can do it better, and I'm starting to scale out with other people doing the delivery, because for every stage I have this massive sheet and there's all these different toolkits and Miro boards which go with each stage.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point you've raised about how a big part of your job, for lack of a term, with clients is really challenging them and talking about stuff which is, pretty cerebral. And then on the other side, you're saying how part of the job running a business is uploading receipts, checking emails, and it's almost like this swing from one extreme to the other.
It is, and to be honest, when I upload receipts or send invoices, I don't create value. I do stuff.
Yeah.
There's no long-term value. When I spend time and say, actually, how do we create a tool which enables 5 or 6 different people, or say in a big firm, 20 people, have a conversation and a dialogue which creates alignment so they can find a way at significant value?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I also thought it was really interesting that you said that you haven't gone, and I try to promote this. I try to say this is an option. You don't have to go full into a 40-hour working week. It is a case of hiring by the hour, right?
Yeah, and yeah, I've done that, and a lot that will grow.
Yeah.
But it's do one thing, get it working.
Yep.
Good enough. And there's been a side benefit. So my wife has a fairly busy job. She has bugbear jobs, like we have to calculate the hours for our childminder. It takes ages.
Yeah.
So I've created an Excel spreadsheet. The childminder now just takes a photo, sends it to Alicia. All the hours go on. Job done.
That's so good.
Yeah,
that's so good. Talk to me about the hiring process, because I think people's number one fear of hiring, and we've all done it. I know I've done it. I've probably even been one of those bad hires where you go through the process, you hire them, and then either they're a dud to start with, or you find that you have to, maybe your situation was different, I don't know, but I found I was constantly having to manage them. All tasks came through me. I was constantly having to check stuff, and I was like, I've essentially doubled my workload. How have you avoided that? How are you working to avoid that?
Well, so one thing which has been, look, 'cause I've had lots of people over the years in previous roles, I never ever hire anyone unless I'm like really excited after the call. If I'm
cool.
I've got to have that person.
Yeah.
If I'm not really excited and you're like, yeah, they'll do, it's a no. So you have to be really excited. That's the first thing. And then you get a better person. What I've worked on, and this is taking some of your learnings, Mike, is focusing on the outcomes and how they've done. I've also done, for example, so if a task needs to be done, I've done a video of me doing it. That has been so helpful.
Yeah.
So that has helped. And I think, one thing I found really helpful is like doing one thing and then doing the next. It gives a bit of time to come up to speed, because actually the break on it is, I want to outsource some of my social media, but I need to spend a day or two really thinking carefully about which bits need to be done by me, which bits can be outsourced. And that balance will change over time. but that will be about Alicia understanding, okay, what is Ben's tone of voice? How exactly does he say things? Because that's actually really helpful for someone to
Yeah.
get right. But there's so many things long term I want to get it that I can just talk to the camera or talk to the microphone, and Alicia can turn that into a post. But it's a journey, but she's far better organised than me, so that's good.
This is the funny thing I find. Like my team are like, nope, Mike, you can't do that. Remember, because you've got this stuff coming up. I'm like, oh, yeah. Like it's so important to have someone else's brain sometimes looking at the tasks that you're doing, and it actually, in a funny way, even though they're being restrictive, it frees you up to be a bit more creative.
Well, it's interesting. One of the greatest challenges, I think, for anybody is headspace.
Yeah.
And we're hit by
Yeah.
so many things. And deep concentration, deep focus work is hugely valuable, but it's difficult. And I'm sure we've all been there. You open your inbox, like there's all this stuff there, and you're just like, oh, yeah. And whereas actually knowing that it's not on your plate actually creates some headspace. So yeah, that's great. So no, it's been a really, really positive. And I think as we scale the business, it does make me think that as I have more client-facing people coming to the UK, what I don't want them doing is stuff which is low adding value, sorting meetings, that all of that can be done by someone who's absolutely amazing about that. And that means there's loads of stuff you can do, because how most people, when they work at work, only do about 2 or 3 hours actual work a day anyway.
Yeah, and even then, if they're doing that every day, like that's considered smashing it out of the park, And I just think I'm a firm believer that we should try and offload as much of this as possible onto people who are good at this kind of stuff. Some people are just really good at it, and the funny thing as well is, if they are able to batch this kind of work together, it exponentially gets better for you. Because again, I don't know about you, but for me, when it comes to admin tasks, because I would avoid doing it so much, I would kind of do it in dribs and drabs.
Oh, completely.
Right.
I can remember mileage expenses. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I've got 6 months worth of, and now I've got that. So all that happens is Alicia looks at my calendar, works out where I've gone, puts it in the Xero, in the finance system, and it's done.
Yeah.
I don't know about it, which is great, because I'm absolutely rubbish at that.
Yeah. And it was a really good point you made as well about how you just talk to camera and essentially she can create content out of that. Is that something you're doing now or trying to do, or how's that working?
That's going to be down the road, because the reality is, I think when I employ people, you want to set them up for success. And I don't want to give them a task I could not do myself.
Okay.
So for me, it's very much saying, okay, so what are social media? What are the outcomes? Okay, here's a framework. Here's some training. And then initially we say, well, I'm going to do this, but you're going to do that bit. When that's working well, we'll extend it, because actually the reality is, if you ask somebody to do something you couldn't do yourself, it's going to fail.
Interesting.
So I think it's for me, that is the best approach, because Alicia is very good at what she does, but if I asked her to get inside my head, it'd be very traumatic. But actually, that's not a reasonable thing to expect. So we'll learn over time. But that's the nice thing about starting with not that many hours, because if I started with 40 hours a week, it would have been a struggle to fill it.
That's really interesting, and I like the idea that, and this is something I think people have to understand, is there is no hire in the world who is completely up to speed on day one, and it's a progression of having to work and learn how to work together.
Yeah, completely. But no, I've been waiting. I interviewed a few, and one of the tips were don't. Some of them negotiated on cash, which was fine. The better ones did negotiate on cash, and I didn't go for bargain basement. Because actually quality was important. And learning how to get money to her, that was a bit of a game, but we've worked that one out. So she actually gets paid now, which is kind of helpful.
Yeah, that's good.
But yeah, no, for me, really, really positive. And I know the challenge is to further systemize what I do and what we do, because I mentioned that signature system, and there's different bits of that which can be done by different types of people.
Right.
What matters is the value delivered to the client. So, for example, say you're getting, one thing I do a lot with people is something called business model canvas,
Mhm.
and you can I can do a video talking through what that is. A consultant can work with the client, and somebody else can write it up, so everybody can do their bit, and that means you're going to be able to give the client
Mm,
a really good amount of value, but your cost for doing it, and that then means you have a long-term advantage.
I absolutely love that. That's so interesting that you're already thinking about how you would put them into the delivery and the operations side of the business as well. Like you're thinking forward potentially, Alicia or someone else. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
100%. I think that has to happen because
Yeah.
if you run a bespoke business with people, yeah, that's not a
Yeah.
fun. It's just stress, and nobody actually cares what you cost per hour. People care what it costs to achieve a certain outcome,
Mhm.
and if you can do that very cost effectively and give them a great service, and some of that is doing the same thing again and again, so you are absolutely the best in the world, and some of that is have the right people doing the right stuff. Because generally, in most companies, unless you're very senior, you don't get a PA. You only
Yeah.
get that at the top. But actually, how many middle managers? I used to spend half a day a month, like typing in an Excel sheet, calculating the VAT on my expenses. That was not smart use of resource.
No. And it's so from what I have been reading recently, it's we are in the like a decision-based economy. So many businesses now, like I said, middle management is about let's see if we can make better decisions, and there's a huge portion. And you're right, if a big chunk of your time is spent, first of all, attending meetings, secondly, doing whatever it is that is like admin tasks, and maybe you'll be able to tell me differently, and I would hope it is different because there's so many businesses now that when I was working at corporate businesses would absolutely frown against having an external VA do those admin tasks for you. And I'm like, it seems crazy to me that even the company wouldn't just fork out for the sake of a couple of $100 to get that done. Is that changing now that you've seen? Talk to me through that.
I don't see any evidence of a change. I was talking to someone I know who's got a senior
Wow.
role in a large company, and they're like, "Wow, I'd love to see what you've done there." Yeah, so no, I think it will take time. Look, in most contracts, you are measured on, even though you're measured on output, there is still you're going to a certain number of hours. As the team grows, one of the things I really want to do is give the team 4-day weeks
Yeah.
so they can have a really good quality of life, time to balance work and life, but give amazing output. And
Yeah.
that is them doing what really adds value to our clients. They've still got a way to go, but it's exciting.
Yeah. So that's awesome, and I love your point earlier, as you said about you want to make sure that you come off the call or the interview excited to work with them. That's so I haven't heard anyone say that before, but I guess that really boils down to the fact that if you're going to be spending at some point 8 hours a day with someone, even communicating them with them first thing in the morning and last thing at night, you want it to be someone that you can have a conversation with, right?
And excited about the energy and the
Yeah.
enthusiasm they bring. Now, one thing I will say is you do have to make an allowance because initially there's
Yeah.
going to be a cultural difference if you're employing someone in the Philippines. And as you get to know each other and get to understand each other's lives, that cultural difference will go. But initially, you are not going to have the same rapport as you meet someone from your own culture over a
Yeah.
coffee.
Yeah.
But it was great. Today I just got an email. I've been out for my little lunchtime bike ride. All this is done, and I think I've been fortunate. I've got someone who's like thinking, okay, I can tell that they are thinking, how can I help you more? How can I do this?
Mm.
How can I? It's great. I'm super pleased, and
Ah, good.
yeah, it's great.
What would you say? So let's kind of start breaking this down for people then. That's a really interesting journey that I hope guys watching you've seen some similarities there. So first of all, what has hiring, and I know you have hired before, but maybe in general, in this particular role, what has that done for you in your business? Like, what are the decent outcomes that have come from that?
It's given me time and headspace,
Yeah, yeah,
which means I
interesting.
can do more of what I want to do now. I've had a super productive January.
Ah, awesome.
Um, but it's really exciting actually. So I've got three in the next week or two. I've got three big meetings, which are talking about
Awesome.
the
That's
sixth
so good.
system. And those, yeah, they're going to be better because we have a very compelling offering now.
Yeah.
And I'm partnering with someone else to do some of the delivery who can fill in. So there's some areas I've got skills gaps, who can fill in some of those. So that's really exciting. But yeah, and this is how, but also if all of that lands, which I think there's a reasonable likelihood it will, revenues are looking very strong, but this year is going to be busy.
Yeah.
And I need to have my ducks in a row because stuff will fall over. So I've got some time scheduled tomorrow to start to get the social media done because there's still more to do. But I'm very pleased I've made this step.
That's awesome, man. That's so good to hear. So, kind of the antithesis to that, then, what were you hesitant about or unsure about, maybe with this process, but with hiring in general? What do you think is a common fear? I don't know.
A couple of things, and especially if you have the Philippines, it's a lot cheaper. That is the reality. And so if you're looking at a VA in the UK, if they said I want 40 hours a week, that is very, very expensive. And so that does make things a lot easier because the increase on your fixed cost is less. So I think that is a huge enabler. I've hired people a lot before, so I wasn't massively worried about the process. I probably was a bit nervous about doing it overseas. But I've got to say that the standard and attitude and mindset I've got is really, really good. And because I didn't go bargain basement, I'm not dealing with the equivalent of someone new into the employment market. I just think he's someone who gets it, who understands all those different things. And I'm going on holiday in February, and my plan is not to look at my email. I don't think I'll need to.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really good. That might be the title, actually. That's really powerful. So, what advice would you give people who are on the fence? They've heard that, they need to hire, like, maybe they're one person or like a partner in a team at the moment. What would you say they need to do?
Number one, understand exactly how you're spending your time and understand how long all those small jobs are actually taking you. Two, it came with your stuff. I've also read the clock workbook. The idea of recording yourself doing something is hugely powerful. That is a really quick way to get a process written down and start small. But also accept it's going to take a bit of time, but also when you're interviewing, if it doesn't feel right, don't recruit. I've learned this in previous lives. Always be patient. On the sales service course, I don't think I would have had the courage to do it without that. I would have had too much of a jump in the dark, and it made the process a lot quicker. I had all the templates ready to go, and they were super helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. There we go. I'll chalk that up as a win. That's awesome. So that's a really interesting point that you raised about if it doesn't feel right. One of my something that I really struggled with was, let's say 80 people applied to the job and I ended up getting down to one and that person wasn't quite right. I do have a funny thing where I'm like, well, I have to hire someone from the group that's come up to me. But in actual fact, there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, fish in the sea, right? Don't hire the best of a bad bunch, if that makes sense. Hire the right person.
Yeah. So in my previous roles, I can think of one hire later on when I must have advertised about 4 times, and I was really fussy. And we had 5, 6 people. I was just like, you are not right. Good people. And then when the right person came, I thought, oh my goodness, in fact, you're way, way smarter than me. And he was fantastic.
Wow.
I have also had experiences where I've gone, I'm in a rush to hire. You are suitable.
Right.
And it doesn't work.
Right.
It sometimes works, but the thing I've learned with this is you need to be excited. And in those early weeks, if you're like, no, this isn't right, unfortunately at that stage, it's easy. We all have our personal characteristics. I can try to fix things and fix people and try. And at that point, you actually have to say, no, this is not working. End it fairly and respectfully.
Yeah.
And I've learned that, over the years. But certainly, the gut feel thing really matters to me. And I wouldn't recruit if I'm not excited.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That and looking back now, it's been very clear with the people we either have hired or let go, or haven't hired, that that's been a component that I haven't been aware of. What about some of the mistakes that maybe you haven't made on this one? It sounds to have gone quite well, but in the past you've seen, or that people tend to make. What do you think those are?
I would say not having a structured process in how you understand that person, the questions you ask, and not, if you only talk to one person, you don't get a feel of the market. You need
Yeah,
to interview a couple of people
yeah,
to get a feel for what is right for you. And also, it's easy to think, oh, actually, I've got this huge stuff, push it over there, and actually you set that person up to fail. If they had done that to you, you would struggle. So you
yes,
have to, you must absolutely push outcomes, but
yeah,
it's enabling them to succeed. But it's always delightful to see when you get good people start to bring their own energy, and then the
yeah.
key is to let them go, and also accept they will cock it up. But how? I
Hmm.
cock it up. We all cock it
Yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. What about, you mentioned earlier that you just record videos. That to me has been the greatest, outside of the internet, the ability to record video this cheaply and this effectively and have people watch it within seconds of uploading it is the greatest advancement that we've made. What do you use as that tool?
I use Vidyard.
Vidyard.
Yeah,
Vidyard. Oh, is that, it's got a green little icon?
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I do know Vidyard. So that does like the screen capture and a webcam, and then you share that link. How does that work?
Yeah, yeah, you share them, and it's unlimited. So Loom is 5 minutes, but it's great. It's a classic one. I mentioned going back to my wife and the childminder. So
Yeah,
the childminder works first in the morning and last thing at night, 2 days a week. But for various reasons, there's all types of complications in the hours and what
yeah,
gets paid for what and all those things. And my wife is a GP, so
right.
seeing patients, gets home at 8 p.m. Oh my goodness, got to pay the childminder. Sits there with a piece of paper, adding it all up,
Yeah,
pays the childminder.
yeah,
I mean, he ends up going to bed at midnight. So on that, I used to have my
yeah,
skills to build a spreadsheet with all the logic, and now all of that process, everything, the HMRC stuff, all that stuff will be completely outsourced. That will save half a day a week, and
yeah,
we share doing things. But she's kind of got a busy job as a GP. We've got 2 small kids. Time is precious.
yeah,
And that type of thing is just huge. But I couldn't do that without the ability to record a video.
yeah.
But I had to do the work to build the spreadsheet, because if I'd done it without that, I would just given chaos over, and
Mm,
chaos would come out.
that's interesting. It's certainly been, it's a habit that I've had to get into, of being like, wait, let me record a video of me doing this and sending it off to people so that they can learn it. I find I keep sometimes slipping back into, well, it'll be quicker for me to do it, where I have to keep reminding myself like I need someone else to do this and I'll record it. Is that something that you find yourself doing or not doing? Maybe, I don't know.
Yes, there's always that temptation to do it yourself, but it was only that's when I went through the task. I spent a morning, and I realized I spent the
Yeah,
whole morning doing my mileage, doing my expenses, check, and I thought, actually I've created no value this morning, and none of
mm,
those tasks were big.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so it's and I think the more I do it, the more I get used to this. I was quite used to delegating anyway,
sure.
but probably not big. I would probably was used to taking on quite senior hires and delegating. Okay, move our whole digital strategy forward. So this is a slightly different thing, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's proving to be very helpful. And also, it means when new people come in who are client facing, they can add more value.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Ben, I can't thank you enough for taking us through that, because it's quite exposing, and a lot of people are unsure of that stage of the business. So thank you so much for taking us through that, and how you've managed to do it. And it's interesting hearing about the difference between your previous work and some of this work as well with hiring. If people want to get in touch with you or find out more, what's the best way to get in contact?
Ben at thevalueengine.co.uk.
Awesome. All right. Well, man, thank you so much for coming on board. And yeah, I will speak to you later.
Thanks, mate.